All right, we are having no, I need to start again. Our first Australian guest is today with us. We had a few Australians, but they're living overseas. So David Thomas is the first Australian who actually lives in Australia. So I'm very excited to get into the conversation, especially for his area of expertise. So before we dig deeper, David, I want to know, who are you, what are you doing, and how did you get to where you are now?
Thank you, Petra. I'm David Thomas. I run a business called Think Global Consulting, and I'm based here in Sydney, but you probably gather from my accent that I come from the UK originally. So I've lived in 3 cities around the world: London, Hong Kong, and Sydney. These days, I really facilitate business and investment between China and Australia. I work with Chinese investors and entrepreneurs looking to do business in Australia, which is a big country with many opportunities. And of course, I also work the other way around, helping Australian entrepreneurs and business people do business in China. I've got a long experience in China through my days in Hong Kong, a strong network in the China market, and we've had a lot of success in bringing particularly SMEs together, small businesses together, to do business, to raise capital, and to find new opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit more about why China, and what have you seen over the last, say, 12 months, the changes that you are focusing on now, even more so with your business?
Yes, well, I started going to China in the late 80s, so a long time ago, when it was a very poor country and not much was happening at all. But there's been more change in the last 5 years, I think, than in the previous 30 years. It's the pace of change and innovation in China is staggering. Anyone who goes to China regularly, as I do, just notices so much change every time we visit. So China is really important for the global economy. It's the center of the Asian century. It's an economy growing now at about 6% a year. There's a billion people. There's 300 million middle class. There's hundreds of thousands of millionaires and many billionaires, and China is now the future, I believe, of the global economy, and it's a wave that everybody needs to find a way of getting involved in. Of course, many people fear China and worry about China's influence and worry about the way things are going to turn out. But all I can see really is opportunity for people that can see past some of the fear issues and perhaps look at more of what can be achieved.
Mm-hmm. And when you say you're constantly seeing those innovations and changes when you're going there, can you talk a little bit more? What are those changes and innovations, and what can we learn from them?
Yes, well, China came quite late to the party in a way, but we were all using the internet and using emails before China even got onto the internet. So to some extent, they've leapfrogged a whole generation of people who were learning about the internet and starting to get up to speed with technology. And now they've moved ahead on steroids, and they're moving straight into some of the highly advanced areas of AI and new innovative technology. But I think the greatest change that I've seen coming out of China is the e-commerce sector. The retail market in China has virtually gone completely online and gone completely to the smartphone. So whilst we still have legacies of shops and of bricks and mortar type stores in Western countries, China's almost gone totally e-commerce. And now Chinese retailers apparently buy, on average, 5 to 6 products a day online. Which is, just mind-boggling when you think about it. And it's largely because it's so accessible, it's so available, it's so efficient, and because they have an army of people who travel, who go around on motorbikes delivering packages. People order 5 products and send 4 back because it's so easy to do. So I think China is leading the world in e-commerce, and I think companies like Alibaba and Tencent that nobody had heard about 5 years ago are now becoming global giants. Alibaba is already the largest e-commerce company in the world.
Yeah, and when we talk about skill sets, obviously this change consumer behavior requires a different skill sets for companies to get on board to fulfill more e-commerce and more online behavior. What
Yes.
are the skill sets that are in demand, and how can we upskill in those areas?
Yes, well, the key skill set for doing business with China is what I would call cultural intelligence.
Mhm.
So we used to have IQ. We then sort of had EQ, which was, emotional intelligence. Now I believe that the big skill for leaders around the world today is going to be, in the future, cultural intelligence. In other words, a curiosity, an interest, intelligence about dealing across cultures, dealing across borders, feeling entirely comfortable in a room full of people who speak a language which you don't understand. These are new skill sets for people to learn, to be more comfortable about, and to become really curious about.
And obviously it leads to the next question. Have you got any hot tips on how we can prepare for this cross-cultural communication and leadership?
Yes, well, we should read. We should read a lot about culture. I think a lot of people find China kind of too scary to even think about. But that's obviously that's not going to work. Not for young people looking into the future. It might work for older people. But I think we need to read. We need to travel. I'm always amazed at the number of people who've never been to mainland China, which I think in this day and age is just totally unacceptable. It's not expensive to go to China. You can travel around. You can, show some curiosity, make some friends, get immersed in the food, the culture, the environment. There's no excuse these days to say to others that the world's second largest economy and which will soon be the world's largest economy, you've never been there. I don't think that's acceptable. So I think you can read a lot, you can travel a lot, and of course you need to start doing research on whether your business has an opportunity in China. And if you operate in some of the key sectors that matter for China, which are healthcare, education, tourism, food, resources, infrastructure, environmental protection, and some of these sort of key service sectors, legal, accounting, and so on, there's almost certainly going to be an opportunity in a market of over 1 billion people, growing at 6% a year. And I would encourage everybody to go and visit China.
Definitely. And you were talking about threats or being fearful of entering the China market. What are the most common fears that you have experienced so far when it comes to dealing with Chinese companies or even the culture?
Yes, well, I think there's sort of geopolitical threats. People worry about China's influence globally, and there's lots of talk about foreign influence and spying and surveillance, security issues. So that's a kind of high level fear, which I think is propagated a bit by the media. And maybe some governments around the world who find that promoting fear is a good way to stay in power. But I think at a business level, I think people worry that they're dealing in a culture that they don't feel very familiar about. They're people who speak a different language, people who operate in a completely different way. And of course, the Chinese are notorious at striking a hard bargain and doing a great deal. And I think people worry they're going to be ripped off, they're going to have their IP stolen, or they're going to be copied, and they worry, I think, too much about things that are actually quite manageable and controllable if you put your mind to it.
Definitely. And what would you say could we learn from the Chinese history, becoming from a very poor country to now one of the leaders in the economy? What can we learn from this journey?
Well, I think there's no doubt that China's been asleep for 200 years and has awoken in a big way. I think what can we learn from that? Well, I think we can learn that change is all around us. We can't take anything for granted. Like 30 years ago in Hong Kong, people used to say to me, I mean, it sounds ridiculous now. When I lived in Hong Kong, people used to say to me, if you're going to learn the Chinese language, you should learn Cantonese, because that's the most important language. It relates to the south of China. It's the dialect that relates to the south. Whereas today, everybody speaks Mandarin. That was just ridiculous that people in Hong Kong believed that the future language for China would be Cantonese. And anybody who could see into the future would have said, no, it should be Mandarin. So it's quite easy to get misled in an environment that you're not very familiar about. So what can we learn from China? Well, one point I'd really like to bring up in particular, which is a completely new phenomena, is the effects of a one-child policy. So China, for the last 50 years, has had a one-child policy, meaning that whereas most countries have seen an expansion of their population, like India and parts of Africa, China is actually seeing its population already reach a peak and starting to decline, because there are now 2 adults with 4 parents and 1 child. So families of 7 people, where the wealth, the attention, the focus is all on one single individual. And that's an extremely new phenomena. And we've all got to come to terms with what that means. At one level, what it means is that lots of very young people in their 20s and 30s have got money beyond anybody's imagination, because all this money that's been made by their parents and grandparents is already in their hands. And they're now, this group that we call Chinese millennials, about well over 300 million of them, a population that is already greater than the size of the USA, is cashed up. They're spending money on retail, on luxury brands. They're becoming a major contributor to the luxury retail sector globally. And this is a very new thing, that young people with no mortgages, no debt, only cash, at a very young age, are having to grapple with the enormous wealth. And I wonder often what that means for the future.
Have you got a crystal ball prediction what that means for the future? Will it change the way we work, or jobs, or the industries, or the economies?
Well, I think it will create a lot of idle rich, because these are people that perhaps don't need to work, and can live off their investments and hopefully get good advice. But no, I think it's a bit too early to make solid predictions about what this means. But what it definitely means is that we're going to have hundreds of millions of old people, rich old people, coming into the global market, looking to retire somewhere in the world, probably not in China. And that opens up possibilities for lots of countries that have big open spaces, that have nice environments, who can start to become and build retirement places for very rich Asians, particularly Chinese, who are being supported by their young millennial, but who have money to live in any part of the world and can enjoy their future life in retirement.
There are massive
I
opportunities.
often say I think Australia has an opportunity to be the retirement village of Asia, because we're a big country. We're a big country. We've got a great environment. We've got a lot of space. We have a well-developed system for education, financial services, healthcare. Australia is a great place to retire. It doesn't sound very smart, but it can have a lot of economic benefits.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. And also, Australia is also a bit of an education hub. So I'm teaching,
Right.
as you know, my hobby at a couple of universities. And one of my classes is 100% Asian students. And, I love it. I think there's so much potential to tap into the young generation, to, do business with them in one or the other way. But then also, as you just mentioned, with the retiring generation, to provide, a kind of very different offer and economy. So I think that's extremely exciting, and I don't think many people have thought about both sides of the coin to actually tap into that opportunity.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have a lot of. Not only do we have the baby boomer generation from the West, who are all retiring in the next 10 years, but then we're going to have this big, massive Chinese and Asian retirement population as well. So the demographic profile of the globe in the next 50 years is actually very different to how it looks today.
And what kind of advice would you give companies who are already working with Asian teams that might be part of their company already, but are struggling with this cross-cultural management because they've got a very different way of doing business and of working, but they're still needing to come to the coin with the outcome, obviously?
Yeah. Well, there's lots of books to read about cultural intelligence and managing cross-cultural teams. There's lots of courses to attend. I mean, I often get asked to speak about this. But I think it all starts with a personal curiosity,
Mhm.
interest. I think, I mean, talking about your topic, which is the future of work, I think that people, particularly young people, are in too much of a hurry to get on with their KPIs, their jobs, whatever it is they're doing. I don't think there's enough time given to thinking more broadly about bigger issues. And learning from others and reading and listening and observing what's going on. I think everyone's in too much of a hurry. And I
Mhm.
think technology has actually created this because we're just constantly interrupted by technology, whether it be social media or news or I think we all know what we're talking about here. Everybody lives in this rushing environment. I don't think there's enough time being spent thinking, being curious, learning, and taking time to learn about something like cultural differences, which is not something you can just do a 20-minute podcast on. It's a lifelong learning. I'm still learning. I've been going to Asia for 30 years. I'm still learning about the culture. Things still surprise me. Things happen that I can't understand. And I regard myself as very comfortable working across cultures. So for people who've never experienced it, I can't understand how they could get up to speed by just doing a course or listening to a TED talk or reading a book. It's a lifelong journey, cultural intelligence, and it takes a lot of time.
I think that's a great advice, and it applies to literally all aspects of our life. Just simply stay curious, be curious about others, about industries, about economies, and question what it actually means and what it impacts. What impacts is got it for your work, for your team, for your own life. So I think that probably would have been the best advice that you could give. And if companies want to explore opportunities to get into the Asian market and who don't have any experiences there yet, how could we go about this?
Well, obviously, this is what I do. I have a blog, that people can read. You can get it at my website, which is davidthomas.asia. Um, but I think, I mean, obviously, it starts with research. I think that there are many people who, for whatever reason, have never thought about doing business in Asia. And I think that's a mistake. I think people should take some time out to read, to learn, to talk to people, to explore opportunities, to get on the ground, to do some research and start feeling a bit more comfortable about it. It's a big topic to give you a quick answer, but I think as I say, it starts with curiosity and going out and having a look. And that can be as simple as putting on a backpack and walking around China for a week. I think lots of people would get a lot of benefit just doing that.
Definitely. And last but not least, what are you personally most excited about those changes and opportunities that it will bring from a professional point of view, but also from a personal point of view?
Well, I'm excited about lots of things, particularly commercializing innovation developed in Western countries in China. I think this is the big opportunity now. Whereas in the past, we perhaps waited for the Chinese to invest in our home countries. Now, there's a huge opportunity to take innovative products, ideas, services, technology to China to commercialize it in China. And we have 3 or 4 projects on the go right now, which is doing exactly that. But I might finish by talking about AI, because I think AI is very interesting. I think it is slightly scary, and I don't have all the answers. I'm sure many people in your network do, but I've been thinking about this because for the last 2 or 3 years I've been working with a VA, a virtual assistant in the Philippines, who's fantastic, and so I've become familiar with the concept of offshoring and working with a VA overseas. And I think you have to be reasonably well organized to do that effectively, because you're effectively transferring work and knowledge to somebody who's not in front of you. So you've got to be organized, there's got to be task lists, there's got to be processes and systems. And I think I'm reasonably good at that, and I think most people are. But what I've been learning about AI is that you don't actually need to be that organized, because the AI will learn from you. So whatever haphazard way in which you work, however, whatever systems, processes, or directions you go in, the AI will learn all this while they're taking this work off you. And I think that's a extraordinary idea, that AI could effectively take over a lot of the things that people do, which I think would then leave us really with only one skill that is going to be valued, which is the ability to relate to people and to build personal, trusted relationships. And I've done that my whole life, and I find that quite interesting.
I couldn't agree more with you, and that's definitely the most exciting part about technology, that it forces us to be more human again, and this is where we are
Yeah.
striving. All right, David.
Well, that's what my business is all about, really, is building trusted relationships and putting people together and making it work. Nothing to do with technology.
Where can everyone find more about you, what you do, and how you can add value to them?
Yes, so go to my website, davidthomas.asia. That's where I keep all my blogs. I have if you're interested in China, I have a newsletter called China Bites, BITES, which there's a daily and a weekly version with very small snippets every day about what's happening in China, why it matters, and why I think you should be paying attention. Lots of people subscribe to that. So you'll find that all on my website, davidthomas.asia.
We'll definitely include all the details in the notes. And yeah, we really appreciate your time this morning, and we can't wait to see more of what you're doing with Australia and China.
Thank you, Petra.
Thank you.
Bye for now.